Hello, and welcome to the webinar, Securing Your IT Infrastructure Without Breaking the Bank. My name is Eric Wallace with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have a few administrative details to share with you, then we'll turn things over to our speaker. First, we'd like to thank Tanium for their partnership with today's event. They've been wonderful partners to Argyle, and they're committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. Thank you again to Tanium. We appreciate you joining us today. We welcome you to stay connected during today's event. For those of you who are active tweeters, please follow us on Twitter at Argyle Exec Forum, and be sure to follow Argyle on LinkedIn for special announcements. I also wanted to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we've curated based on the feedback we've received over the years from our members. We've worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the session today, and we appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, we want to hear from you, so please submit all questions that come up during today's event into the chat section of the interface. Following the discussion, we've set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speaker, and then we'll begin our discussion. Today, we have Roy Schuster, who is Senior Director for Value Engineering at Tanium. Let's begin. So the theme of our webinar today is that you can do both. You can have the best of both worlds. You can secure your environment and also reduce your costs. And the context that we're trying to do this in is an uncertain economic climate that is characterized by inflation and tightening budgets and also ever-present geopolitical concerns. Meanwhile, at the same time, cyber threats are increasing in terms of frequency and quantity and variety and effectiveness. So securing your IT environment becomes more and more important. Now, while you're securing your environment, you can't allow costs to scale proportionately to the threats. Otherwise, that's all you're ever going to spend money on. It can't be a linear spend. So we kind of have to figure out how to do both, how to secure our environment and also control costs. Now, these are seemingly contradictory objectives, and they're at odds with each other, but they actually may not be, and we're going to explore that a little bit today. There are many organizations that have managed to do both. It's not easy, but it's achievable with the right focus. So let's begin. Roy, let's start by getting to know you a little better. Can you please tell us a little bit about your roles and history?
Hi, Eric. Great. Thank you for inviting us here to talk today. And just as a little background of the speaker, to the participants, my name is Roy Schuster. I'm based out of the Chicago area. I've been with Tanium about 3.5 years. I lead the value engineering practice here, which is basically our team that helps our prospects, our customers, think about the economic value of cybersecurity and IT operations. So customers considering purchasing our platform and engaging with us, we work with them to build ROI models and cost benefit analysis and other types of deliverables to help them out. Been in the industry many years. Prior to Tanium, I worked for Cisco Systems for a long time and various consulting firms before that. And that's my background, and happy to be here today.
We're happy to have you here today. So our first question is, there are various ways that organizations have tackled this challenge. What do you see as the starting point and the most fundamental principle? And before you begin answering that question, I would like to point out that our first poll question is online. And all you have to do to answer the poll is click on the polls tab on the right-hand side of your screen. I'm sorry to interrupt. Roy, go ahead.
That's great. That's great. Thanks, Eric. So yeah, I mean, where do you start with this this challenge that you described in the introduction, right? We believe, and we think it's a lot of people in the industry would agree. It starts with visibility into your environment. It's really fundamental to everything, right? That you need to do. We look at organizations that we interact with. There's growth in terms of the number of devices and endpoints that they're going to need to manage over time, and that continues to grow and accelerate. And that's a daunting challenge to manage all of those devices and endpoints. Yet we just interact with a lot of organizations that do not have full visibility, and they're falling quite short of that goal. The primary reason that any organization is going to strive to get that full visibility is, they need to manage and secure the endpoints in their environment, all the devices that are on their network. There's an old adage, and in various forms over the years, you can't manage what you can't see, and therefore you can't secure what you can't manage. So we think that's critically important. But the important thing to note here is that there's sort of what we might call a side benefit, or to that visibility advantage. Once you're able to get full visibility, you are now able to take all sorts of actions in your environment that can help your organization save money. So you have to secure and manage what's in the environment, but once you get that visibility, now you have the ability to act on information that you have about the environment and save money in a lot of ways. And that could be an offsetting savings to security investments. So, how does that occur? There's several ways that might occur, and we see various ones across all the organizations that we work with. First of those examples would be, once you're sure that all the endpoints are seen and fully managed, that means they're up to date with patches and regularly scanned for vulnerability and other kind of compliance issues. This is going to reduce the number of incidents and problems that those endpoints create, and that reduces the overall support cost for the fleet. Less cost, fewer incidents, fewer tickets, less chaos, and that results in less cost. So just getting the visibility lowers the overall cost base to support that environment. Another, kind of secondary example, again, adjacent to what we're talking about, but really important, is things like software license management. Once you have that full visibility, it's going to give you the ability to interrogate the endpoints in your environment and see what software has been installed and how often or when it was last used. And organizations are frequently able to find unauthorized or rarely used software in the environment, remove it, and then lower your organization's overall software bill. So it's another great side benefit of gaining that fundamental visibility that you need to manage and secure your environment. There's lots of examples here that we run into with our customers, and those are just a couple.
Great, thank you. So before we launch our next question, we'd like to launch our second poll, which again is in the polls tab on the right-hand side of your screen. So the next question is, how do you get to full visibility, and how do you increase the level of visibility that you already have?
Yeah, great question. Bottom line is, you need tools, or a tool or platform in your environment that can see every asset and every endpoint. 80% or 90% visibility is not sufficient, right? And I think a lot of organizations are sort of at that level, which leaves them really exposed, and they're just living with that level of visibility. The 10 to 20% visibility gap that creates is just unacceptable. It's kind of like installing a security system in your home, but you're leaving one or two windows wide open in the front of the building, right? So when organizations are evaluating the tools that they use today to manage and secure their environments, or they're evaluating or considering new tools, they need to make one of the first principles of that decision-making process or evaluation process the degree of coverage that tool or the platform can provide. Can it see all endpoints, regardless of the different types of devices that are out there, the different operating systems that might be in the environment, or the location? Is it on the enterprise network, or is it remote? And can it do all of that in real time? So that's sort of the fundamental principle for looking at that and developing the level of visibility that you need and is acceptable.
So visibility is clearly the starting point here, and once that visibility is in place, organizations still have to execute on key processes and tasks in both operations and security. So these processes are people-based, and in the current climate, organizations are facing tight budgets and also difficulties in finding and retaining skilled resources in both IT and cybersecurity. So what that leads to is, how do you approach improving efficiency in processes, and what role does automation play in that?
Yeah, I think, we've talked a lot about the current climate, but this is a question that I think is kind of timeless and hasn't changed much over the years. Process improvement, streamlining, and removing wasteful or redundant steps in the processes that you have to manage the devices in your environment, to secure them. It's hard work, and doing that analysis, it's hard work, but it's really worth the effort. One of my colleagues has done a lot of great work recently with some of our customers, trying to improve the way they manage vulnerabilities. A really classic approach. Really, how do you do it today? The as is state, and then what will that look like in the future state, enabled by better information via the visibility that's necessary, and tools that allow tasks and activities to be automated wherever possible. we find that in many organizations just don't have the time or take the time to analyze this, or they're stuck in sort of the mindset of that's how we've always done it. It's understandable because of how much is on everybody's plate these days, but doing that level of analysis and determining better ways to drive that efficiency is really critical.
So, how do you see organizations translating these efficiency gains into savings, and how is that improvement monetized?
Right. It's monetized in a number of ways, right? Again, we're in a tight hiring environment and a tight budget environment, right? So avoiding the ability to have to hire efficiency gains that mean that you don't have to hire as many people as your business is going to grow and evolve. That's really important. Attrition will occur naturally over time, and if you can create efficiency gains, that means that some of the people who leave the organization over time will not need to be replaced, especially relevant in these days as our workforce ages. A lot of organizations we work with are trying to figure out ways to reduce reliance on third-party contractors or outsourcers, and take more control of some of the important processes that they use to manage and secure their environment. But the best case is, and our starting recommendation with customers that we work with is, can you use this efficiency to redeploy resources to either more strategic projects or to be more proactive around security? And this is something that's going to have significant benefits down the road from the standpoint of being able to head off problems and issues before they happen. So if the day-to-day operation becomes more efficient and we can shift resources to proactive activities, making sure that devices in the environment are covered, patched, are in compliance, and so forth, and heading off some of those problems down the road, that will save a lot of money in the long run.
So, in addition to visibility and process efficiency, organizations also struggle with tooling. And then this is accumulating many tools either by choice, through acquisitions, or purchases made as a business unit or divisional level. So organizations might be looking to consolidate tools or simplify their tooling portfolio. So what do you see as the value of consolidating and simplifying your tooling environment? And how do you view the choice between a platform-based approach versus a point solutions or best of breed approach? And I would like to call attention to our next poll in the polling section on the right-hand side of the screen.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that, the general consensus that we see with our customers and the feedback they give us is that having a platform approach is better from both a cost perspective and from a unified security perspective. It gives you a single source of truth. It minimizes what we might refer to as the overhead or tax of complexity, all the synchronization and integration activities. We interact with a lot of customers today who are trying to save money by going through an exercise of tool rationalization or consolidation. That might be driven internally. It might be driven by a third-party consultant that's working with them on that type of effort. And a lot of the CIOs and CISOs in the organizations are looking at this really large component of their budget around tooling, and they're asking their teams, do we need all of these tools? Are there redundancies among those? How can we simplify that environment? And at the same time, ironically, in a way, having too many tools in an environment can actually create risk. If we all recall the big supply chain hack that occurred at the end of 2020 around SolarWinds, this was caused by a vulnerability in an IT management and security tool. So ironically, the tool itself caused the problem. Wasn't a third-party application, but a tool that was intended to help you reduce risk actually increased risk. Kind of a last point here is no organization is going to be able to consolidate down to one tool or one platform. So there's going to be multiple things in the environment, even if fewer is a better objective. So another factor to consider when we talk to customers about how they orchestrate and integrate all the tools in their environment, are the tooling vendors and platforms that you're using, are they in sync and are they compatible? Do they have partnerships and alliances amongst each other to make their platforms better together? If that's the case, that's really going to reduce the cost to you from the perspective of orchestration and integration of those tools and platforms, and that's really critical.
So let's come back to risk. Organizations strive to prevent threats and avoid adverse events like breaches or other incidents that can disrupt the business or interfere with delivering on their mission. But the reality is that you can't stop every threat. So how do you communicate that reality that you can't stop every threat to stakeholders who might not understand IT security?
Right. I mean, it can be tricky, right? The sort of the layman or the someone who's not in our industry, like I think most of our participants today are, may not understand that, and it continues to be, I guess, worsened by the fact that we get assurances of 100% prevention or of break-ins or breaches or products that claim to be unhackable, right? That can make it a lot more confusing to the layman. There's a couple of newsletters that I follow where they like to call out almost in a humorous way those types of claims from different vendors, right? So I think it's a steady message to decision makers outside of IT and outside of the CISO organization that this is an ongoing battle, that the threat landscape shifts and moves at all times, and that the sort of due diligence and the process to fight this is an ongoing battle because things change in the environment so frequently and constantly. So I think it's a communication matter more than anything. But then I think it gets into the financial side of risk, which I think is important too.
So given that reality, what should the goal be? What should businesses focus on?
Yeah, I think risk mitigation is the goal, right? And when we work with customers around quantifying that, it's difficult to quantify the value of an investment in security that then pays off in terms of risk reduction, risk mitigation. But it's real, right? And it's potentially massive impact. Better visibility and better efficacy of the processes. So we've talked about the information that this is all based on fundamentally from a visibility standpoint. And those processes that become more effective as you look at things like patching, vulnerability management, asset management, et cetera, all are going to act on that data, and it's going to decrease the frequency of adverse events, and that might be a breach, ransomware attack, et cetera. But we know that there's going to be incidents nonetheless. Again, we can't prevent everything. So it's good to be also focusing on reducing the level of effort to investigate, detect, remediate, respond to those incidents when they do occur. And that's also achievable with better processes, data, and tools. So I think the important part to think about is that there's always going to have to be reactive activity, and can we make that more effective and efficient? That's going to be a cost reduction factor, no matter what, even if an incident does occur. So it's another way that you can make your environment more secure and also managing costs in a downward direction.
Is there anything that we talked about that you want to elaborate on, or that we missed, or that you want to go into more detail on? Any advice you'd like to give our attendees today?
Yeah, Eric, I think one of the main things that we see that's a sort of a difference maker between organizations that do this really well and ones that struggle with it is taking the things that we've talked about today, transformations, cost savings initiatives, consolidation efforts, et cetera, and managing them in a programmatic fashion. And that means, assigning a project manager to it, assigning a team to drive the transformation, measuring and reporting out on progress over time so that you know what's going on, and that if you're achieving the results that you're targeting, and making course corrections, right? Reevaluating periodically. I think this has a tendency to become something we do from a sort of set it and forget it type mode, as opposed to institutionalizing it as a program to make these improvements over time. So I think that's really critical, and that would be a piece of advice and a success factor that I think we would see.
Great, thank you. So let's change the channel a little bit and take some questions from the audience. Just as a reminder
Yeah.
to attendees, you can submit your questions using the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen. So let's jump in with the first question here. How does Tanium's ROI compare to other point solutions or platform software? For example, SFDC, Microsoft, or ServiceNow?
Yeah, I think those other platforms you mentioned are probably a little broader in terms of their functionality than what we offer at Tanium. I think the key thing is that there is a lot of potential addressable ROI and value in all of those platforms. The reality of it is not all organizations take advantage of what's accessible, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It might be lack of adoption, difficulty of integrating things together, difficulty in transforming processes, as we mentioned earlier, to correspond to the advantages of that platform, and so forth. I mean, we see a wide range of ROIs, but we generally see that our customers can identify a lot of potential savings, a lot of potential risk mitigation, a lot of benefits that are intangible, and so forth. Then the key thing is how aggressively will they go after that, and how thoroughly will they realize some of that information or some of that value over time, based on how effective they are at transforming. Any tool, any platform can claim an ROI, but it's really up to your organization then to take advantage of all the capabilities and actually realize and see that ROI over time through efforts that are not easy, but are very achievable, and we find that all the time.
What's the value of mitigating risk in real time versus not being able to mitigate risk in real time?
Great question. Obviously, on any incident, right, the clock is ticking. We've worked with one CIO out there who talks about how when an adverse event occurs, they've got very very few minutes to address it. They've got a few more minutes to assemble a team to coordinate the response, and they've got just mere hours to actually mitigate the risk before it takes impact. So the time frame is short. So I'll go back again. The broken record part of this is probably going back to the visibility, but seeing what's happening in the environment and seeing it in real time, and having a tool or set of tools out there that allows you to get those alerts in real time and react is going to lower the risk curve over time, and that's the risk of both damage to the business, operational disruption, et cetera, as well as just the basic level of effort and cost to respond and remediate. So we're working in an environment where time is certainly critical, and time is money, and over time that the quicker the response can be is going to drive your costs down in a serious manner.
The next question says, help, our software tools have proliferated out of control. Do you have any advice for us?
Well, my first response is that you're not alone. We're running into this certainly in many organizations, and we talked about some of the reasons why that is. There's a concept of technical debt over time, which basically means accumulated debt from the tools that may have been purchased in silos, or may have been acquired through acquisitions and mergers. There's a lot of ways that debt is acquired over time. The organizations that I have seen do this most effectively have, again, taken it from a programmatic approach of starting with identifying what's in their environment today, a full and complete inventory, doing an assessment of those tools in terms of capabilities, overlap, redundancy, capabilities that may not be necessary because business needs have changed, and so forth, and then establishing a longer term plan to go to a simpler footprint. one organization we're working with just calls it application rationalization, and they're doing it on the tooling side as well as on the business application side. And it's such a big area of cost save that that's been the number one priority of the CIO for that organization over time, over recent times. So it's a matter of rolling up your sleeves and doing the work to get it done, and then also identifying kind of options within that approach over a multi-year time frame, meaning what can I eliminate sooner rather than later. You may have contractual commitments. There may be a difficult disconnect process if you decide to go away from one tool or platform. So our approach is usually, when we're working with an organization on this, to define sort of what the end state might look like in a simplified environment at a lower cost basis. And that means less software costs, but it also means lower infrastructure potentially to support all of those tools, relay and distribution servers, et cetera, things like that. Let's define what that end state looks like, and then let's define a multiple year approach to getting there, one step at a time, seeing what we can remove and making sure that throughout that journey, we remain, secure and covered from the different tools that we need to have, but eventually get to a much more rationalized state.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, what's the biggest mistake you've seen companies make in consolidating or simplifying their tooling environment, and how did they get past it?
Great question. The biggest mistake, I'll kind of go back to what I just said, is that you can be too aggressive or not aggressive enough. Finding that sweet spot is probably the right point. Not having an end state defined where you're looking at what would you like it to look at, what would you like the target state to look like 2 years out, 3 years out, and then not defining the steps to get there. And that's part of it. I think also looking at the features and capabilities of the different products that are in your environment, and if you're evaluating them on strictly sort of best of breed capabilities, that can be a mistake from the standpoint of you may be getting some value out of those best of breed capabilities, but you also may be paying taxes from the standpoint of having that additional tool out there, or having to make that additional tool integrate with everything else in your environment. So the question is, do you need the best of breed capability, or can you manage your business effectively with something slightly less capable, but more integrated and more platform based? So I think looking at that is really important. And maybe one last thing is, we all have products and tools that we've worked with in the past. People's sort of skill base and self-worth to the organization might be based in their expertise in that tool. We have to be able, as an industry, to make disconnects between tools that are, sort of important to individuals or teams, and tools that are best for the enterprise. And if we can do that, we'll be making kind of more rational decisions that are important for the organization.
Question is, how can you establish a robust asset management CMDB system for a company with hybrid and multi-cloud setup?
That's a great question. I think that could be a series of webinars to respond to that. I would maybe say that looking at that question from the perspective of a difficult part of that challenge is the fact that there may be different tools and different ways of accessing the information about those different types of environments. So the big challenge, I think probably the person asking the question is having, is how do you make all of those things work together, right? So I've got cloud environments that I'm managing through maybe one of the major cloud providers and the tools that they provide. I'm managing my own environment, my data centers, through a different set of tools. I'm managing my end user devices and endpoints, and then maybe different things like IoT or devices in manufacturing and so forth. And how do you bring that all together? That's the major challenge, and being able to level set or neutralize that data so that I can analyze all of those environments across the board. Certainly, there are different platforms that do that to a lesser or stronger degree. I think the starting point, though, is trying to normalize that data, right, and being able to look at all of those different types of assets in one place independently and at the same level of detail in terms of fidelity and precision and real-time information. That's the very first step in a very long journey to accomplish what the questioner is asking, and I hope that helps. But I think that is something that's probably a very in-depth topic that could go quite beyond what we're talking about today.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, have you seen any solution or approach where a tool or a combination of 2 or 3 tools has helped organizations achieve visibility not only of their vulnerabilities, but also their assets, which are then ranked for criticality and hence helped in prioritization and remediation?
Right. I believe that's possible. I think that what we try to provide at Tanium, that's one of our objectives, right? And providing information. There are a lot of tools out there that provide that type of information from a risk assessment and a scoring perspective, and they do that in different ways. And I think having that sort of independence where you're not only comparing risk over time within your organization, but also being able to manage that and score it against maybe organizations like yours to see where you're doing well and where you're not doing well. So I think that type of information is useful. What we're getting at here is really, how do I use information about my assets to make good decisions, right? And that is dependent on having completeness to the information, having currency or real-time information, and then being able to act upon it, right? So moving from the step of visibility to the step of being able to manage and control assets to actually remediate issues in real time. That's really the flow that needs to happen. And evaluating what you use to do the things that were just mentioned, in the ability to do that in a single flow, I think is the most important thing.
Great, thank you. So our next question is, how do you anticipate the IT security field will evolve over the next couple of years?
I think if I had that answer, I'd have some great investment advice for myself and maybe some for everybody on the call. But more seriously, it's going to keep getting. I would say, the intensity will increase, right? There's no sign that the frequency, variety, and sort of nature of attacks that are going to happen. There's no sign that that's going to slow. The pace of that change is going to slow whatsoever. So we become, as an industry, I think, increasingly reactive, and the organizations and the vendors in the industry that will do well and succeed are going to be the ones that figure out sort of methods and practices to be proactive, to find and remediate threats of sort of a general type, and respond to those, have more ways to be responsive to what's happening in the environment, regardless of what develops in the new types of attacks. So I think that's really important. I think it's certainly a field and an area that is going to continue to be more high visibility than it certainly has been, and it's going to be even more high visibility going forward. I think if we went back a few years, security was more of a background function for a lot of organizations, but that's never going to be the case again. And the general public is finding out more and more about this area than ever before. So I think those are some of the developments that we're going to continue to see. Where it's going to go beyond that is quite difficult to say.
Great. Thank you, Roy, for that insightful discussion. This concludes today's webinar, and I'd like to thank everyone in the audience for joining us today for this excellent virtual event. And thank you again to our partner, Tanium, and enjoy the rest of your day.